G'day guys, Chris Dorry here. Today I'm going to go through my September power rankings. So this is a top 50, so hopefully you enjoy it. And also before I go into my top 50, I thought I'd also announce that next week I plan to do a bit of a grand final preview of sorts where I'll go through both Melbourne's and the Western Bulldogs playing list and sort of give a bit of insight there. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy that also. So to start us off with the order. So to me, if I'm going through the tiers, well, there's a pretty clear top tier. So I've got Nick Dacos and Jason Horne-Francis. So in terms of, I guess, that sheer accumulator, Dacos is without equal up the top end. So he'll certainly add to Collingwood's midfield, but I guess the one thing that Collingwood will want, in addition to a Dacos, is that, I guess, premier first possession winner, where although Dacos is actually an exceptional contested ball winner, it's really, I guess, a bit like with a Pendlebury. It's how he moves in traffic, how he evades, all those sorts of components. Big time accumulator, great around the ground. He's one of those guys you can almost play through quite a lot on your offensive drives. So you really do need that Tom Green, I guess, as that inside distributor to, I guess, make Dacos and the rest of Collingwood's midfield look even better. So that would be what I'd be saying there to Collingwood. Number two on my board, very straightforward for me. I've got Jason Horne-Francis. So other than Dacos, he's clearly that next best midfielder. Look, he's not that same level of accumulator, and that's something that really is an important point. But what's special with Horne-Francis, for me personally, at least, is what he does defensively. Where if I look at defensively, the best players I've seen through the years for me following the junior ranks, which is from 2009, Horne-Francis is the best I've seen in those regards. So just in terms of that sheer chasing, pressuring, tackling, aggression, he's got all those sort of intangible components where he's someone you really want on your team. So that's the thing I'd drive home there. So for me, no brainer for North Melbourne to take and pick one. So, and look, in terms of a ball winner, look, he can win his own ball, wins it on the move. He's a threat inside 50 as well. So a bit like in the SAVWA game, he did get locked up through the midfield and he struggled to have an impact through there. And he wasn't sort of being given that run at the ball that he needs to win it. So what happened? He went forward and then he was causing problems one-on-one and aerially. So you do have that optionality with him. And even with a Dacos, I'd say, look, you've got the versatility with him as well, where although you want him through the midfield, of course, he can go forward, he'll kick his 2-3 goals or whatever it is, or he can go back as well and distribute back there just fine. So you do have those options. But number three, so for me, this, I guess, 3 and 4 tier, they're the high upside guys where either of these guys could be the best in the draft and they could be really incredible players. But on the other hand, there are some risk factors and their games sort of aren't nearly as complete. So their floors are a lot lower. So they could possibly be complete flops or they could be absolute superstars. So we do have those risk factors there, but given they do have the upside for me to be potentially the best in the draft if everything goes well, they do deserve to be in this tier on their own. So with the Darcy, the Dogs will no doubt get him as a father-son, so that's sensational. But he's roughly a 205, 206 centimetre key positioner. Can go through the ruck, but very skinny. So the great appeal with a Darcy is that he's a late developer. He's still growing, which is phenomenal. So having those components, he hasn't really spent the time in the gym, so still very skinny. But he's got all that, and he's also got the rate of development, where before this year he wasn't seen at all as a sort of early pick, to the extent that he wasn't even sort of on my draft board at the start of the year. So that's how exceptional his rise has been. And look, he could be great in defense, and the Bulldogs really need that in defense, so he could possibly start his career there. But yeah, look, for me, probably key forward is the best bet, where he's just one of those rare guys where up forward, just a bit like a Max King, where he's just got that length, he's got the marking, he's very clean at ground level, has the skills. So yeah, look, as long as he gets stronger, builds that work rate, improves sort of, I guess, being that multi-lead player up forward, he can be no doubt the best key positioner in this draft if everything works out well. So, and I think given the rate of improvement, that's always been a key for me when I'm looking at tools and assessing their long-term scope. So yeah, I do think that he'll sort of fulfill his upside and be a really good footballer. Finn Callaghan, so what I'm sort of looking at there is something like he's got those Marcus Bontempelli-esque traits. So he's a few centimeters shorter. He's about that 190 thereabouts. But he's got the same sort of movement, same sort of explosiveness. But a bit like a Bont at the same age, he doesn't at all have that aggression or contested side to his game. So rare mover in traffic. I've never seen anyone move like him at that height through the midfield in terms of that evasion, agility, and then he has that burst on top of it as well. So, but does he have the same forward of centre scope as Bont, being maybe a few centimetres shorter? Not quite that same level of mark, although still a very capable mark. Not sure. Can he win those? Can he develop that contested component? To me, he's really hasn't shown that aggression yet, so he really needs to develop that contested side, that tackling. There's been a few times where he's needed to go and he hasn't. So you do have that relative risk factor, which is why certainly I have him behind a Horne-Francis at this stage. But with that said, he's got the scope to be a better footballer. So if things do work out. But yeah, look, given you're guessing a little bit on that, well, I do have to have him below. But as a sort of, I guess, pick two of sorts, I guess, Callaghan's really the guy for me. And obviously you've got your Dacos and Darcy, but I'm not counting them in sort of that, as in they'll be bid on presumably beforehand. But yeah, that's sort of how I'm looking at the equation there. And from here, it sort of opens up somewhat. So there's quite a lot of interpretation, and my draft board will be radically different to a lot of other draft boards that you see. So I really just wanted to make mine really individual to what I believe of the talents, and I'm not taking into consideration in any respect whatsoever what clubs will be thinking, what other recruiters will be thinking, or other draft analysts. This is really, as you'll notice if you compare this to anyone else's lists, a really sort of independent view and look at the draft. So from here, I've got a Josh Ward as that next best. So for me, he's really sort of in that second half of the NAB League season, really been that almost nearing Dacos level midfielder. So just in terms of that accumulation, that inside-outside balance, racking it up, winning it inside, moves so well, has the skills. So if you want that all-round complete midfielder, he's a really safe pick, and really quite a lot safer even than a Callaghan. So, but does he quite have that upside? Probably not quite. But I could almost sort of say a Ward could be in this category, and he does have a higher floor than both of them. But yeah, it's just one of those calls where it's just a, I guess, judgment call. But really good improvement over the second half of the season. Had we had a final series, maybe I could justify having him higher. But for me, look, I think this is about the right spot. So if these guys are off the board, Ward for me is that next guy. And then Roberts also isn't far behind. So I could even do something like a tier list like this. So I've just quickly put this list together for you guys today, but I really wanted to sort of, I guess, show it in this, I guess, way. So we've got Roberts. So for South Australia, he's had to play quite a bit of forward when he's been playing at Sandful League level. So he'll probably start his career across half forward, but his midfield craft is exceptional, and that's where ultimately I think he'll settle long term. So he's an incredible accumulator. He's got the ball winning, ground level, absolutely superb. Maybe not the most athletic necessarily, and I'd say he could slow down in terms of, I guess, some of the things he does with the football. But if you're looking for someone who's low risk, Roberts is one of those year one ready guys where he can step in, he can be a factor and, yeah, contribute to a midfield or across half forward pretty quickly. So, yeah, I'd be very comfortable picking him. And he's someone where you might not need a top 10 pick necessarily to pick him. I think he'll go probably the second half of the first round and be a really good value pick for a team. And then moving on, so Jack Avery. So this is a unique to my board. There won't be anyone else in the country, I can imagine, that'll have him in the first round. So, but I've really loved what he's been doing. So when he was playing Waffle Colts, he was the competition leader for disposals and really across the board in terms of stats, influence when he was at that level. And then, of course, he's jumped up to league level and he's been superb there too, adjusting immediately, really looking like one of the best players for his team. And he's that, I guess you could say, a Tom Stewart without the kicking skills, where his kicking can be a bit inconsistent to some degree. But yeah, in terms of whether it's that accumulation, he can intercept, he can provide drive off half back. And he's also got the one-on-one capabilities where even though he's a 190, he can take your best key forward, and he's done that against a Tyler Keitel, and he's actually won the matchup. So, and Tyler Keitel, of course, for those who don't watch the Waffle at all, well, he's the premier, I guess, key forward outside the AFL. So to do that, phenomenal, keeping him to the 2 goals and on what is really not the strongest of teams. So yeah, credit to him for sort of, I guess, producing to that level. And then you've got Alik Alir. So again, not sure if anyone else necessarily has him as high as I do. If they do, well, my opinion, of course, is that it's good talent ID. But just as that, I guess, incredible intercept mark in defense, really impressive. So in terms of the capabilities of reading it, marking, he's really got a great deal of courage where he'll back in packs and he'll get crunched and he'll still take it anyway. So he's, I guess, the equivalent of an Alir in this draft, but he's coming in those couple of years older. So you do have that slightly more mature player who has been going really well in the Sandful at league level. Maybe you'd give him a year to develop, so he doesn't have to necessarily dominate from year one. But he seems like one of those coachable guys, really high level improver, where just year on year, if you compare what he's doing this year, certainly to where he was last year, big improver. So again, when I'm looking at those key positioners, I'm looking at how are they improving. Well, Leak is one of those guys where he's certainly improving. So yeah, I like his scope. He could be a future star. I was considering having him maybe one slot above Avery. For me, that was a toss of the coin, but ultimately really like his play. And yeah, I think he could go, let's say, second round, maybe even early second round, if clubs have really been doing their due diligence and watching him closely. But yeah, really like his game. I think he'll translate really nicely to AFL level. On perhaps you could say the more speculative side, so you've got Mac Andrew, so Melbourne Next Gen Academy. And unfortunately for Melbourne, they've missed out by a year in the Next Gen Academy stakes, where basically if there's a bid inside the top 10, you can't just straight up match it. You basically would have to use a pick inside that top 20, sort of, I guess, before there's a bid. So, and with a Mac Andrew, it looks pretty likely that there'll be a bid inside the top 20 for him. Could be inside the top 10. So given that, I don't think Melbourne are going to get him unless they trade up the draft quite a bit, which I can't imagine they would be doing in their situation, given they're sort of in that win now spot as the grand finalist for the coming weeks. So, but yeah, with a Mac Andrew, he's that ruck height, 200 centimeters, very skinny. He'll start his career as a key position player, whether it's forward or back. So he's a project player. So, but yeah, certainly in terms of ruck craft, really love him through the ruck. Incredible leaper, has the soft hands, directs it down to targets through the midfield. But then he's really good around the ground as well. He's mobile, he gets around the ground, good skills. So there's a bit to work with, reasonable mark. He's got that, obviously, stretch. So you do have some of those components there. But just with the way, of course, if you get a body on him through the ruck and you can just stop his run at the ball, well, he doesn't have a good time of it. So, and that's where I guess that time in the gym will really come into the equation, and he'll really need that time to mature to be sort of, I guess, relevant at AFL level as a ruck and become, whether it's that, it won't, I don't think he'll be a Nick Nat level necessarily, but that style of player he could be, although he probably won't have that power. So maybe you're looking at more like a Tom Nichols, Archie Smith type, but yeah, hopefully he can be a little bit better than that. And then you've got an Arlo Draper. So all class, he's one of those guys where he can impact whether it's midfield, forward. So there's a lot of scope there. Strong mark, has the skills, the vision, is quick. So there's a lot there. And he's one of those guys who wins a high volume contested, yet he's pretty skinny still. So as he bulks up, well, he could be a really exceptional midfielder. So yeah, maybe he could be one where maybe I move him up a few slots on this board. But yeah, certainly in this range, I feel pretty comfortable with him. And for me, he's a top 10 pick. So yeah, like his game. And it's really grown upon me sort of more as I've seen him sort of during the year. And particularly in the latter stages when he played at league level and just against men looked just so composed, just so comfortable at that level. That was really the point that really sold me on him as a prospect, it's fair to say. We've got Bodhi Uland. Don't know the pronunciation on the first name, but yeah, I've seen the 2 games of him in the NAB League, but then also I've seen him appear in the VFL for Gold Coast. And yeah, it looks really good. And one of those guys where, again, I don't imagine you'll see him on other draft boards, or if you do, it certainly won't be in the first round. So again, unique to my draft board, but I've really liked his play. He's that, I guess you could say, a Luke Hodge light, where he's got the explosiveness, he can break the tackles, great kick, wins it contested, he can hit the scoreboard, has that penetration, accuracy by foot. So yeah, just really liked what I've seen. And he's got the versatility to impact, it feels like, in a number of positions. So, and look, he's one where I'd like to have seen a larger sample size of him. But with that said, what I've seen has been really impressive. And for me, it's top end of draft stuff. So I'd be willing to place a bid on him a lot earlier than a lot of other people would. And assuming, I guess, Gold Coast don't get the concessions to just, I guess, put him straight on the list without going through the draft, I'd certainly be saying I'd be bidding pretty early and I'd be trying to get my hands on him. So, yeah, and just, I guess, bid on him at a point where I wouldn't necessarily think Gold Coast would be willing to match. So that would be sort of how I'd approach that there. And then we've got a Neil Erasmus. So late year birthday, has that December birthday, which is appealing. Been ultra consistent through the midfield as well. Only was really playing in the earlier part of the year in the Waffle Colts. So I certainly haven't seen as large of a sample size as I'd be liking there. But in terms of what he does, midfield, forward of centre, incredible reader of it in flight, and then he can mark it as well. So you've got those components, developing as a ball winner. So yeah, look, he looks like he'll be a pretty good, mostly mid who can sort of push forward, and you could even possibly push him back. But yeah, if what I haven't liked with him is just by foot, just haven't liked his ball use at all. So yeah, and it's been really a consistent theme in each of my games. So maybe others, I don't get the sense that others are sort of making as big of a deal about his work by foot as I am. But yeah, it just hasn't really impressed me in the games that I've seen, at least. So yeah, there might be others who have him higher, but yeah, just I guess with that lack of confidence around that side of his game, I've got him sort of in the lower end of this component of where I have my draft board, I suppose you could say. So Zach Taylor, so he's another where just sensational finish to this NAB League season, although it was sort of a short end. His last month there was just staggering. So he's not a huge midfielder, he's about that 180, but he's just got everything. So incredible agility, great skills, but yeah, wins a lot of it, finds a lot of it. So really influential mid, and he's become one of those almost, I guess you could say, ready-made mids where you could play him pretty early, and yeah, I think he could go pretty well. So and he's being spoken about mostly sort of as a second rounder. So I'm seeing value if you just want, I guess, a really good mid who can sort of complement some more sort of, I guess, vanilla, slower moving types. Taylor can add a bit of sort of pizzazz through there. So yeah, I like sort of what he offers. Certainly early second round. If I had to pick there, I'd be very comfortable if I'm looking for that sort of mid. Josh Goda, he's been really good generating drive off halfback firstly, can intercept, do quite a few things, but he's also played through the midfield, so there's a lot of intrigue around there, whereas that 190 centimetre distribution by hand good. But yeah, if he develops that contested side to a high level, he could be a really good piece. So, but he just hasn't really, I guess, had a large enough sample size through the midfield to sort of say, yeah, he's definitely going to be that. But certainly he looks like a solid sort of halfback who maybe in the future could become that mid, that sort of tall ball winning mid. So if he can do that, awesome. We've got Wanganeen-Milera, so son of Terry Milera for those St Kilda fans out there. But yeah, he's all class. Just if you're looking for that, I guess, classy outside type, look no further. So just whether you're looking at what he does by foot, how he moves, he finds the ball every week. Doesn't matter what level you're playing him at. So, and look, the contested side could improve. He's certainly an outside type, but you can play him sort of as your wing halfback and he'll fit in pretty easily, I reckon. So, so Josh Rochelle. So I earlier in the year I had him quite a bit higher, but just due to, I guess, a relative lack of consistency, I should say, I've got him at this point. So as a forward, sensational. Through the midfield, he'll win it high volume. But just in terms of ball user, best ball user in the draft for me. But yeah, just I guess with that lack of consistency for me is a bit lower than perhaps he might be on other draft boards. But yeah, just I guess obviously having that dual position impact scope. Yeah, I'm really liking him where I've got him. You've got Josh Sin, so off halfback sort of generating drive, particularly with the run he generates, is sensational. Contested side, I'd like to see him improve. Haven't sort of seen him through the midfield. And some of his kicking has lacked consistency at times, so I couldn't justify having him earlier. But when his kicking's on, that can be a damaging component too. So, yeah, and it's just injuries that have really gotten in his way this year. So, yeah, look, maybe if not for that, he'd be higher. But yeah, this is where I've got him based on certainly what I've seen this year and how I'm projecting him going forward. But yeah, if you're looking for that driver off halfback, hard to go wrong. But a bit like a Rochelle, I think probably Sin goes a little bit higher than this, but we'll have to wait and see as we come closer to the draft. They could be sort of the back end of that top 10 for rough ranges. You've got Matthew Johnson, sensational sort of tall mid. So is that, I guess, 190 plus mid, where just all class, everything he does exceptional, really quick thinker, just moves sensationally through traffic, but skills by hand and foot exceptional. So, and his first half to the year was really disappointing. So coming into the year, I thought he could be a top 3 pick, but yeah, he hadn't really taken the next steps in his development that I was hoping he would. But yeah, what he's done over the second half of the year is, I guess, reinstated, I guess, the earlier confidence that I had in his game, where he's been really producing to a high level. Against South Australia, for me, he was that best player, and I wrote about him accordingly on ESPN. And also what he's been doing in the Waffle reserves, although those games I haven't been watching or had access to, he's been really racking it up at a high level there too, and no doubt sort of doing the same sort of things as he does everywhere else in terms of what he does with ball in hand. So, yeah, he's one of those, I guess you could say, high-ish upside mids where if things work out, he could be really good. But, yeah, look, given the inconsistent start, we just have to see, I guess, whether really, I guess, what he's been doing of late is what we're going to continue seeing and whether we're going to continue seeing that maturation. So, here's one where certainly on grand final day, watch out for him. And if he has another big game, he could be moving up my draft board quite a bit. So, but yeah, he's someone where I'm certainly a lot more confident in, and sort of your late first round, early second round is certainly someone to keep an eye out for. Ben Hobbs, he's going to go a lot earlier than this, I'm expecting. Talk is top 10, could be around that top 5-ish range. So he'll be an early pick as a mid. One of those ready to go, ready-made mids. If you're a fantasy player, write down his name. You want to know who he is. But yeah, what I'm looking at is just a bit vanilla for me, I guess, if I'm to say why I have him lower than others might. So not a great kick, doesn't have the weapons necessarily to his game, not at all sort of quick or athletic. So you're sort of looking at one of those, I guess, Matt Crouch style mids. So I guess that's sort of what you're looking at there. But for me, the contested side of his game isn't on that same level. So, yeah, we'll have to see how Hobbs goes. I think he's a pretty safe pick for a team, but I think he really lacks the upside that a lot of others do. And yeah, I think there'll be quite a few others that will be, in the long run at least, better footballers. So that's why I've got Hobbs where I do. But certainly he's a talent I advocate drafting, but just not as early as a lot of people appear to be talking about him going. Connor McDonald, I've really liked his game. Feels like one of those who's going a bit under the radar and a bit underrated. But yeah, certainly is that mid, racking it up, wins his own ball, tackles well, covers a heap of ground, hits the scoreboard as well, so you can push him forward. So yeah, he's someone where I'd be pretty comfortable picking him. Probably a bit on the lowish impact per possession side of things, which is why I guess a lot of people won't necessarily rate him as high as I do. But yeah, nonetheless, look, I really like his game, and I think he's a pretty solid pick. So, yeah, if you can use, say, a late second or a third round pick to get him, I think he represents pretty good value there. Connor McKenna. So, based on his recent tweet, it sounds like he might be open to coming back to the AFL. So, look, if he is, I'd be picking him in a hurry, because in terms of I guess, his offensive gifts, whether it's what he does by foot, whether it's his run. He's just such a damaging player. So, and he's more than young enough to continue impacting games. So, yeah, if that's confirmed, I'd even consider sort of moving him higher on this board in terms of where I rate him. But the point is, I guess I just wanted to acknowledge him and say, hey, if he does want to come back to the AFL, I would rate him very highly and put quite a decent valuation on him. So, yeah, that's really what I wanted to stress there. So then you've got Blake Slenslog. So he's someone I've been speaking about quite a bit during the year. He's probably dropped off a bit over the last month, which is why he's dropped out of my top 20. But if you're looking for a mature age key position player, he's really more key defender is what I'm sort of settled on now, where key forward, well, he showed some signs, but yeah, look, for me, just marking not strong enough for me for a key forward. So, but key defense, in terms of just how he reads it, that's the special sauce with Slenslog, where he reads it off the boot, he tracks their eyes, and he knows where it's going to go before it goes there. So that's the special sauce there. But in terms of his mobility, sensational for a guy of 2 meters. And then he's got the skills as well. So having those components, and he's strongly built, so he's got a really good all-round game. But if he developed his marking to a higher level where he doesn't drop as many marks as he does, that's when he'd be sensational. So, and that's when you're talking he'd be a top 10 pick in this draft. But yeah, I imagine he'll just be picked up as a delisted free agent. So yeah, great value for a team that is sort of looking for that, I guess, rebounding, intercepting sort of centre half back would be what I'd be saying there. Any team needing that, lock and load, you can play him next year. He's ready. He's been absolutely sensational in the waffle. You've got Jai Amiss, so one of the best key forwards in this draft, and he's been leading the Waffle Colts for goals kicked by quite a margin, to say the least. So really dangerous on the lead. Yeah, he's just been a really good footballer. Probably a little on the disappointing side against South Australia, but showing the rate of progression that he has. He hasn't really, I guess, before this year been too exposed to the junior pathways. So given that and given the rate of improvement, that's what's sort of intriguing me more than anything, but he's also producing as well. So yeah, if he has a big game on grand final day, he's someone where he's really got the scope to move up my board. And yeah, I'll be watching him very closely there. Jacob Van Ruin, so you can play him forward, you can play him back, but very athletic type, and he's pretty good aerially. So, and what he was doing in terms of intercepting against South Australia, I was thinking of having him a bit lower than this, but based on that performance in particular, because he's been mostly a forward, and as a forward, I'm just not sure whether he's necessarily got the ground level craft, the all-round game, enough tricks to really sort of, I guess, be that influential key forward. But what I'm looking at in defense is just how well he reads the game, how well he intercepts. And he's also winning his one-on-ones as well. So I think his game's really well suited to playing in defense. And yeah, I could justify probably early second round or somewhere in the second round picking him if he's still on the board, if that's what I'm after. But yeah, I'd be picking him as a key defender as what I'm thinking, particularly after that South Australian game. But even before that, I was calling a move to defence. And yeah, I thought my intuition sort of turned out right there. Mitch Nevitt, so we're looking at a tall 190 centimetre plus mid. Pretty good contested ball winner, really good distributor. He's one of those developable types where I toyed a little bit with putting him inside my top 20, but for me, he's a bit outside of that. Where he gets drafted, I don't think he's necessarily going first round, but second round, I think he comes into the conversation. So for those wondering on a draft range there. So Mitch Owens from St Kilda's Next Gen Academy. So he's one where what I've really liked in particular is his rate of improvement. So it feels like he's really come on and improved a great deal, and he seems like a late grower as well. So when you're looking at those late developers who are growing late, I'm looking at great scope for continued ongoing growth over the next few seasons. So yeah, he's one I'd be keeping a close eye out for, and I don't think he'll go this early necessarily for the Saints, which is lucky for them. But yeah, he's someone where if I had a second round pick, I'd be bidding on him in a hurry personally. So I think there's a good deal of scope to grow in a number of positions for that matter. I don't think he's necessarily limited to the one spot given his height and his athletic profile. Jesse Motlop. So if you're after I guess one of those crumbing ground level small forwards who can heap on the forward pressure, Motlop's your guy. So Freo Next Gen Academy. So we'll see where a bid comes for him there. But yeah, certainly if you're after that forward, maybe he could even attract a first round bid. We'll have to wait and see how that goes and where a bid comes for him. But yeah, certainly like his game. And yeah, there's obviously quite a substantial risk that Fremantle won't necessarily be able to get him. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Josh Fahey, really good rebounding defender for GWS, but unfortunately there hasn't really been too many opportunities to view him this year. So he's that Trent McKenzie-esque type where just, I guess, is that super boot who can just absolutely belt the ball. And look, he doesn't have that contested side necessarily, but yeah, you can give him the ball and he'll just give it a roost. So yeah, he was one of the very few that for the AFL Academy stood up against Geelong's VFL side. So, but yeah, he could be one of those where he can develop for GWS in defence and be a long-term piece. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, looks developable and one of those sort of, I guess, role players where you could give him the kick-outs and give him some of those sort of responsibilities because he was tasked with it for the AFL Academy and did pretty well doing that. Brady Hoff, yeah, really liked his play. Really looked good against South Australia in particular. He's one of those where you can play him, whether it's mid, forward, and he can have an impact. So I could possibly even have him a bit lower than I should. And he's another where if he's there on grand final day and has a good game, well, I'm open to moving him up, honestly. So yeah, he's a name to watch if you're going to tune into that game. Tyler Sonsie, he'll go higher than this. And what he did for Box Hill's VFL side was exceptional. So have to give him that credit right out of the box. But what has been disappointing with Sonsie has been his NAB League play. So he's had a few good games here and there, but there've been games where he's just been invisible, where he's meant to be the star and it's just like he hasn't shown up. So that's really the problem there. You need someone who's a bit more consistent than that. He has some traits that are very much developable. But yeah, maybe we're looking at that, I guess, maybe like a Paddy Dow type where it's just you really hope he's going to be better than he is. And he's got those attributes where you think, oh, he should be really good, but you just don't quite get that output from him. So that's my concern there with Sonsie. So I hope to be wrong and hopefully he does prove me wrong, but have to wait and see there. And another who's going to go a lot higher than I've got him, but Josh Gibcus. So at the start of the year, I actually really liked what he was doing, intercepting, taking some good grabs. There's that sort of aerial sort of intercepting mark type. That's what he does really well. And he can shut down opponents, so he does have scope to develop long term, which is obviously why he's on my board. But yeah, he's just someone where I don't see enough ways that he impacts games. And if he's playing a lockdown role, he's not intercepting nearly enough. So yeah, it's just one of those where there's just other key defenders that I like more. That's basically what it is. Where if you're looking at a Jacob Van Rooyen, well, he was pretty much the best on ground against South Australia. Whereas with a Gibcus, I've never sort of felt that he's had that in a big game, best on ground sort of influence. So it's just he'll lock down his opponent or he'll intercept pretty well. But yeah, I'm not seeing that rebounding component. There's just other things that I'm not seeing from him. So yeah, for me, it feels like a bit of a trap, honestly, having Gibcus go early, and he's someone where I'd be letting someone else take, certainly if he's going top 10, which it seems pretty obvious that he will, or it seems like will be the case anyway. So yeah, watch for that. But yeah, for me, he's one of those, and this is the key when you're putting together a draft board like this. So it's not about necessarily having all the guys on there that are going to go early in the draft. You really need to be able to discriminate and say, okay, these ones that are going to go early, this name, this name, this name, I wouldn't pick them and I'd be happy for someone else to pick them. And that's one of the things I'm really trying to do with this draft board as well, where with guys like Sonsie and Gibcus, they're not high conviction picks for me. So I'd be very willing to let someone else take them, draft them, and see if they can get the most out of them. But I just don't have that level of conviction I do with a lot of other names. So given that, I'm more than happy to pretty much take others and almost put a cross through their name and pretty much admit, look, they're not going to be there at my pick or where I'd be willing to take them at based on the order on my board and those others that I'd be taking before them who should be available anyway. So that's sort of how I look at that equation there too. So Sam Skinner. So this will be a name familiar to Brisbane fans. So, and I've been writing about him for ESPN quite a bit as well. But yeah, if you're looking for that ready-made key defender, there is none better than Sam Skinner. I'm telling you that now. So he had a series of, whether it was 4 or 5 games, where he was going for an average of, he was averaging 4 contested marks a game, and he was going for, I think it was like 10 or 12 marks a game. So intercepting everything, winning his one-on-ones, is a really good key defender. So he's obviously had all those injuries. He's had the injury history. He's not the athlete that he was. And obviously he's all those years older. But if you're looking for that instant plug-and-play who is AFL quality and can kick out a key defender from a best 22 now, he's one of those guys where you get. And like with a Slenslog, you just take him as a delisted free agent. And that's another reason why you don't need someone like a Gibb, because if you're getting someone like a Skinner, who we know is that AFL caliber guy, and you don't need to use a top 10 pick to do it, well, yeah, you just don't need to spend that much necessarily. Angus Baker, really like what he does as that mature age rebounding defender. So first half of the season was playing for Essendon's VFL side, then went back to GWS, but then of course we've had the season cut short. But yeah, someone I've been tracking for a number of years. Loved what he was doing in the NEAFL. I was saying then, his AFL quality, someone draft him. And it's the same with the VFL this year. When I watch him at VFL level, and I've seen a couple of his games for Essendon in the VFL, it's just like, why is he not on an AFL list? What's going on here? So great interceptor, rebounds really well. Someone draft him, please. But yeah, if you can get him late draft, rookie draft, and I think you can, because he's been overlooked that many times, not picked up in the mid-season draft, just take him with your last pick if you want that, I guess, plug-and-play rebounding defender who can intercept as well. So, and at 190 centimetres, that's awesome, sort of getting that sort of play. And then Bailey Rogers. So another mature ager. You have to give mature agers credit. A lot of people who follow the junior ranks, they don't follow the state leagues. I really make a point, even more so now than ever, to really track the mature ages closely. Because if you look at the odds of a lot of these mature ages actually making the grade, well, a lot of them actually do. They have better careers based on where they're drafted than a lot of the juniors picked. So it's really vital that you track these mature ages and that you can pick the good ones. And Bailey Rogers, for me, is one of those, again, plug and play. Just put him in an AFL team and he's going to be a piece. So for me, I'm looking at him as something like a 4th or 5th best midfielder for a team, where you have him as part of that midfield rotation. Have him in the midfield, rotate him forward. He's also played back. He's been in the Waffle Team of the Year the last 2 years as a sort of rebounding halfback. But what he does through the midfield's even better. So yeah, if you're looking for a good, classy, all-round mid, sensational skills, has good agility, so he moves well. But then he's a threat forward of centre. So having all those components to him, I think is going to provide quite a good deal of value at AFL level, and for me is a really safe pick. So yeah, if I'm wanting, I guess, another good midfielder who can push forward, yeah, I'd be picking him up in a hurry. And again, I'm not necessarily sure where he goes in the draft, but yeah, he's someone that if you can get him late, you've absolutely won. You've nailed a pick right there. So yeah, do watch him with close interest. And he's someone where he's really joined, I guess, the state league's elite. That's a point I made in my weekly wrap this week for ESPN, where I was really saying you've had Jai Bolton and Hayden Sleuth. They've been the 2 elite state league mids for a number of years now, since about 2017 or thereabouts. They've been the 2 elite guys. You had that year where Tim Kelly was drafted. He was there in that same category without necessarily even at that stage being better than either of them. Well, it's the same sort of situation with a Bailey Rogers, where he's entered that category now of that real sort of uber elite state leaguer, where he's AFL quality now. But is he quite that level, almost nearing that Sleuth and Bolton level? So, but being that good, he's that AFL lock and load, just draft him type. So, again, I'd be very comfortable drafting him. I think he's a ripper. Ned Long, I wish I've seen more of him play, but I just haven't, which has been really the irritating thing with the, of course, shortened NAB League season that's come to a close. But I've liked what I've seen from for Northern. So he's that tall mid, about that 192, 193, where he wins his own ball, he can push forward, take a grab, hit the scoreboard a heap. So you've got those options with him. But Why I don't have him higher, I found him probably low impact per possession, relatively speaking. So if he was that more damaging player in that respect, I'd have him higher. But yeah, in the couple of games I've seen of him this year, his impact hasn't necessarily been in that regard as high. But yeah, I think from his, what is it? I think 3 games he's played, he's probably kicked 7 goals, just going top of mind. So doing that and also spending time through the midfield, sensational stuff. So he's a good player. Respect to him, should be on a draft board, and he's someone I'd draft, certainly if he's there later on. Cade Dittmar, I've liked him for quite a while, but in that game against South Australia, that really drove home, hey, this guy's really needs to be in my top 40. So although he's a physically more mature mid, just in terms of how aggressive he is, he's got the acceleration, but he's got the size, he's got the contested ball winning. And in terms of that tackling and pressure, he's just got that lively feel where anytime he's around the ball, he's really influencing a game. So having that sort of impact, I have to give him a lot of respect. And again, if he's another where he's there late, I would pick him up in a hurry if I'm after another sort of really good mid. So I'm almost slightly thinking I'm underrating him, which might sound interesting to a lot of people who might think, oh, that might be around where he gets drafted, or maybe he goes a little bit later than that. But I'm a Dittmar fan. So if he has another good game in the grand final preview, well, yeah, giddy up. I'm probably moving him up the board quite a bit. Joshua Brown, so he's that 32, 33 sort of disposal per game type. He's hitting the scoreboard now. Strong ball winner, covers a heap of ground. So he does everything pretty well, basically, and high production. So you're looking at a pretty safe pick, but does he have the upside of others? Not sure. There are others who are more influential. And look, Brown's game against South Australia was on the quiet side, but in fairness, he wasn't sort of played through the midfield as much as others. So we just have to wait and see there. But hopefully, again, in that game against South Australia we see on grand final day, hopefully he has a big one, because he's one where, again, I'm open to moving him up, because he has been higher on my board. But yeah, that's just where I've got him currently. But mid-draft, I think, is a reasonable pick if you're looking for another good mid. Hugh Jackson, so I've actually had him really consistently in the first round of my draft, but his second half of the year has just been really disappointing. He's just really dropped off. So he's been that skillful, high accumulation mid. Just does most things pretty well, but he is slightly outside-ish. But yeah, just with how he's dropped away, I've had to move others up ahead of him. But if you can use a late pick to get him, by all means. He's that good sort of mostly outside mid, although he's played a lot of inside. He's that smaller mid who's more suited on the outside in that gaff type of style without being as good. For a quick feel, Judson Clark, really influential player, can really generate a lot of drive, worth having. He probably goes, I'd say, early second would be a rough feel. So it's a good one. Will Pearce, he probably won't be appearing on anyone else's draft boards, which I find interesting, given every time I've watched him, he's been just so influential and so damaging when he's really, anytime the ball is near him forward of centre, he impacts games and hits the scoreboard. So he's the leading goal kicker in the Sandful under-18s, and he's been absolutely sensational all year. So want to give him his props. And he hasn't been invited to the National Combine. He's not even a part of the South Australian under-19 squad, which for me is absolutely staggering. So if you can't include him in that, I don't know what the South Australian talent ID people are doing. But Pearce has been sensational all year. Credit to him. Loved him again when I watched him on the weekend, and he just delivers, and he's really damaging. So I'd pretty happily, if I'm looking for a damaging forward, I'd be looking at him sort of in the rookie draft and just use your last pick on him and take him. You're getting a good forward who's got scope to be a damaging player. So he's someone I'd be very keen to get. So then moving on to the next bracket. So I've got a pretty defined, I guess you could say, top 40, and then from there I've got the next group down. So, and I could continue beyond 50. There's a lot of others I would consider in this category too. But these are the guys where maybe they make it, maybe they don't, but I do have them behind the others anyway. So Toby Conway, he's probably, certainly other than a Mac Andrew, he's that, I guess, clear-cut, definite sort of other good ruck. So very developable. Just that sort of strong, contested sort of ruck, good tap ruckman, competitive through there. Doesn't necessarily have all the other tricks of a lot of others, which is why I wouldn't have him as high. But yeah, he's one where with a few years he could at least be a depth guy. So I think he's a pretty reasonable one where if you take him, you can have him developing as a ruck, and I think he'd do pretty reasonably there. He's been pretty influential in the NAB League, certainly, and pretty competitive. So yeah, I think he'd be a solid pick and deserves picking, no doubt. Jack Williams, look, for me, his marking has let him down a few times, which is not what I want from a sort of, I guess, stronger bodied key forward. So he can leap, but he's not all that athletic. I'm just thinking, is he best as a key forward, key back? He's one that I'm sort of losing some conviction on, where I've liked him, and he's had that sort of Tom Hawkins-esque sort of, I guess, impact, where it's like forward of centre, put him in, if there's a boundary, throw in, put him one-on-one, he can just grab it out of the ruck and kick a goal. So he's got that sort of strength and power to him, where he can have an impact that way. But yeah, I just need to see, I guess, I don't know what it is. There's just something missing there for me where I just can't say with conviction his AFL quality. For me, he looks possibly that slight tier below where, look, maybe he makes it, maybe he doesn't, not sure. But yeah, just can't have him as high as I've rated him in the past anyway. So just haven't been as convinced with his form, particularly through the second half of the season, as I'd like. Rhett Bazzo, he was one where for a while there, he was almost on my don't draft list, but seeing what he did against South Australia really changed my opinion of him, where you put him in defence and just seeing the way he intercepted Reddit so well, the confidence that he played with just to go for every intercept mark that he could, yeah, that really sort of sold me on him and made me sort of have a bit of a rethink where, look, is someone where he's viable to draft, wouldn't necessarily pick him early, but there's enough scope to develop where I could justify having him here. We're a bit like a Williams, he's a maybe who could develop without necessarily being a definite. So Tyrone Thorne, look, he's been really good in the waffles. So he's tiny, he's a sub 170, but he's been really good through the midfield, and you could play him as a forward where he can apply the pressure, incredible athlete, has the skills. So yeah, if you're looking for sort of that crumbing pressure forward, who can push through the midfield as well and be sort of play those minor midfield minutes and provide a bit of X factor through there, I think Thorne's a pretty good pick, and he finds a good amount of it. So I think he's got a bit of viability there. Here I've got a few uniques. So Max Pescard, he was on my draft board last year. Liked what he could do as a forward then, and is been able to play a bit more up the field this year. So pushing up onto a wing, he's been good when I've seen him in the VFL this year. So yeah, he's someone I'd be pretty comfortable picking. Same with Saxon Crozier, where for Brisbane, he was really that, I guess, just outside type, whereas that 190 centimetre, good endurance, good skills, but he's developing a bit more of a contested component. So another where I just wanted to give him that sort of credit. Sam Frost, when I've seen him in the NAB League in particular, just seeing how he's intercepted, how involved he is, just seeing the production, he's been doing pretty much everything well, but yeah, his kicking's let him down a little bit, so that's why I can't have him higher. But yeah, again, looks like a pretty solid piece where he could develop. Josh Clark, another of these guys who's that 1 year older, but again, if you're looking for that rebounding defender and the drive he can generate, well, whether it's what he's doing with his run, whether it's by foot, he can really aggressively sort of rebound from defense. So covered him in a weekly wrap if you want to read a bit more about him on ESPN. But yeah, again, really like his game, can generate drives, so very draftable and someone, again, late rookie I'd consider. Angus Sheldrick. So he's the guy responsible for Jason Horne-Francis not having the game he would have liked against WA. So what Sheldrick did, he just got a body in front of Horne at every centre bounce that Horne was in attendance and basically just didn't allow him that run at the ball that he'd like. So, and Sheldrick won that matchup. So imagine doing that against a pick 1 or pick 2 in the draft. So he's a really good footballer, and he's not even that tall. He's a 179, 180, but strong body, strong build, strong ball winning mid. Not necessarily that sort of flashy, classy, athletic, doesn't have any of those sort of tricks necessarily, but yeah, he's got some things to him where, look, he's just competitive. He's got the scope maybe to be a component through a midfield. So I'd be open to considering him later as a rookie. So, and then you've got a Cooper Beacon. So classy rebounding defender, can intercept. He's been pretty good for South Australia, and really over the last month or so, he's impressed me enough where I can justify having him as that number 50 on my draft board. So, and as you'll see with a lot of these names, if you compare it to other draft boards, there'll be players who might be top 20, maybe even top 10 on some draft boards that I haven't included on in my draft, but that's either due to, I guess, a lack of exposure, or in the games I've seen, they've just been terrible, basically. So top of mind, a Campbell Chesser, I would imagine would be in a number of top 20s still, maybe top 10 for some, I'm guessing. But yeah, he just, when he's played, and injuries have played a part in this, so I'll give him a pass there. But I just don't have a level of conviction in him where I can necessarily rate him ahead of any of these other guys. Because when I've seen him, he just hasn't impacted games. He hasn't been winning his own ball. He's meant to have the speed and skills, but he hasn't really been able to show it in the games I've seen. So there'll be guys like that, and where I just haven't sort of seen them play to their capacity to be able to necessarily pick him ahead of some of these guys on my draft board. And there'll be others that fit that category as well. But between now and the draft, I'll still be watching the footy, even once the under 18 or under 19 champs wrap up. I'll still be watching games. I'll be reviewing games. Any game footage I can get my hands on, I'll be rewatching. So there will be continuing changes to my draft board, and I'll complete another one in November sometime, where it'll be at least another top 50, and I might even, a bit like last year, extend it out as a top 75, just to give credit and kudos to a number of other players, because within this, I guess, 41 onwards range, look, I could put another, you could call it 25, 30 players in there very easily, where I just have them in a similar category of players to these guys, where they've got the scope to potentially make it. So I do want to give them credit. So, and yeah, I'd like to add them to this list. So I think I probably will do that sometime in November. So do watch out for that. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you enjoy this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future updates. And just as a reminder as well, next week I'll be producing a video, one about Melbourne, one about the Bulldogs, so do keep your eyes peeled for that, because it'll be some sort of list assessment of sorts. I'm yet to figure out the details on that, but it'll be probably something like you haven't really seen enough of online, and will be, I guess, one of those real, I guess, credits to how they've built their list as well. So I think I'll probably add some components of that to some of those sort of elements of analysis. So yeah, do make sure you watch out for that, particularly if you're a Melbourne or Bulldogs fan and excited about the grand final. So thanks, guys, and see you in the next videos.